My name is Margaret, and I used to believe that family was everything. I gave up my life, my youth, and my health just to raise a son who would one day abandon me for a woman who smiled sweetly to my face but poisoned me behind closed doors. It started with little things, her whispers in my son's ear, her sudden rules in my own house, the way she rolled her eyes when I spoke. But then came the moment that shattered me, the day I reached for the family bank card to buy groceries, only to discover the password had been changed. She had convinced my son that I didn't deserve to manage money anymore in the house I built with my bare hands. That day, something inside me broke. I wasn't just a mother-in-law anymore. I was a woman betrayed, and what my daughter-in-law didn't know was that I have secrets too. Secrets that could destroy everything she thought she owned, and I was ready to use them. I never saw it coming at first. That's the thing about poison. It doesn't choke you all at once. It slips into your veins slowly, silently, until one day you wake up and realize you're already dying. When my son first brought her home, I smiled. What else could a mother do? She was beautiful, polite, with that kind of sugary smile that melts everyone around her. I wanted to believe she loved him, and maybe in the beginning she did. But soon I started noticing the little changes. It began with whispers. I'd pass their room at night and hear her voice, low, sharp, like a snake hissing in the dark. I couldn't hear every word, but I knew the tone. She was planting seeds in his mind. The next morning, my son's eyes wouldn't meet mine at breakfast. He pushed away the tea I had made for him his whole life. He laughed less with me, spoke less with me. The silence spread across our home like mold. Then came the rules, her rules. Shoes had to be taken off this way. Dishes had to be stacked that way. Even the groceries I bought were suddenly wrong. My son used to love my home, made bread, but now, apparently, it was too heavy. He preferred the brand she bought. I told myself I was imagining it, that she wasn't replacing me, just adding herself. But one night, I heard the words that broke something inside me. Through the crack in their bedroom door, her voice, cold as glass. Your mother is too controlling. If you want to be a real man, you need to cut the cord. My son didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He just sighed, like he was tired of me. I felt my throat tighten, my hands tremble. I went back to my room and cried silently, biting my pillow so they wouldn't hear. The woman I welcomed into my home was turning my son against me, and I was powerless. But the worst was yet to come. One evening, I reached for the family bank card, the same card I had used for years to keep this house running. Groceries, bills, medicine. It had always been in my name, always. This time, when I tried to use it, the transaction was declined. 3 times, my hands shook as I checked the details. The password had been changed. When I asked my son about it, his face went red. He didn't even look at me when he said, "It's better if she handles things now. You don't need to worry about money anymore." His words sliced through me like knives. She had taken everything, even control over my own home. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the shadows stretching across the walls, wondering, if she could take the card from my hand, what else could she take from me? I tried to swallow my pride after the card incident. I told myself it was only money, that my son would come back to me in time. A mother always forgives, doesn't she? That's what I thought until the night she humiliated me in front of everyone. It was a Sunday dinner, something I had kept alive in our family since my husband passed away. I spent the whole day cooking like I always did. The smell of roasted chicken filled the house, potatoes baking in the oven, my hands dusted with flour from kneading fresh bread. I thought maybe this would be the evening we'd laugh again. Maybe my son would remember where he came from. But when they walked in, I knew. Her heels clicked on the wooden floor like gunshots, her perfume arriving before she did, heavy and artificial. My son trailed behind her, carrying nothing, his face glued to his phone. She didn't even glance at the food. Instead, she wrinkled her nose and said, "Oh, you still cook with so much oil. No wonder it feels so heavy. These days, we prefer lighter meals, don't we, darling?" She turned to my son and touched his arm. He nodded, without even tasting a bite. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, still smelling of garlic and flour, tightened around the serving spoon. My brother-in-law, who had come over, tried to break the silence with a joke. But she wasn't done. As we sat down to eat, she picked at the chicken with her fork and sighed dramatically. "You know, Margaret, you don't need to work so hard. At your age, maybe it's time to rest. Leave things to younger people. Times have changed." The room went silent. My own son didn't defend me. He just kept chewing, avoiding my eyes. I felt the sting of tears burning, but I forced a smile. "I enjoy cooking for my family. It's what keeps me alive." She laughed, a sharp, cruel laugh that echoed in the dining room. "Alive, Margaret, please don't be so dramatic. You should be grateful we even come here. We could eat anywhere, but we choose to spend time with you." The words hit me like stones. My chest tightened, my hands trembled, and I could barely lift the glass of water to my lips. Around the table, nobody spoke. Not even my son. Dinner ended with silence, plates half-eaten, my bread untouched. When they left, she kissed me on the cheek, her lipstick cold and fake, and whispered, "Don't take it personally. It's just, you're not really needed anymore." The door slammed behind them, and the echo rang in my ears. I stood in the empty dining room, staring at the plates, the food I had poured my soul into, untouched. My brother-in-law tried to comfort me, but I waved him away. I didn't want pity. I wanted my son back. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence so loud it felt like it was crushing my chest. My son was slipping further away, and she was the one pulling him. But then something happened. The next morning, when I picked up the laundry basket, a phone buzzed on top of the clothes. It wasn't mine, it wasn't my son's, it was hers, and on the screen was a message that froze me in place. Her phone buzzed in my hand. My fingers trembled as I turned it over, the screen lighting up in the dim hallway. One message glowed at me like fire. "Don't worry. He believes everything I tell him. Soon the house will be ours completely." I froze. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. My house, my son's house, my husband's house. The walls I scrubbed, the floors I polished, the roof I sacrificed for. And she dared to call it hers. I should have dropped the phone right then, pretended I never saw it, but instead I opened it. My hands shook, sweat sliding down my back. The conversation was there, scrolling before my eyes, long threads of whispers to some unknown friend. "She's old, stubborn, and useless. I'll convince him to put everything in my name. By next year, she'll be out completely." Each word stabbed me. My breath came shallow, my knees weak. I sat down on the edge of my bed, clutching that phone like it was a weapon. And in a way, it was. That night, I didn't sleep. I heard their laughter in the next room, muffled behind the door, and it cut through me. My son's voice, the same boy I raised, the boy who once clung to my hand when thunder scared him, now belonged to her. She had stolen him piece by piece, and he didn't even see it happening. The next morning, she asked casually, "Did you touch my phone? I couldn't find it for a while." Her eyes lingered on me, sharp and cold. I forced myself to smile. No, why would I? And in that moment, I realized we were at war. Not the kind with shouting or slamming doors, but a quiet war, silent, deadly. Every glance, every word between us was loaded with meaning. She knew I suspected her, and I knew she was planning something bigger. Days passed, and I began noticing more. Whispered calls she took in the garden late at night. Papers she hid quickly in her purse when I entered the room. My son spending less and less time at home, always busy at work, but somehow always following her lead. I tried to talk to him once. I knocked on his study door, my voice trembling. "Darling, can we sit together, just us, like old times?" He didn't even look up from his laptop. "Mom, I'm busy. Don't start this now." The words hit me harder than any slap could. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to remind him of everything I had done, every sacrifice, every sleepless night raising him alone after his father died. But instead I walked away. My tears blurred the hallway, and I realized something brutal. She had won him. But she hadn't won me. That evening, as I cleared the dining table, I found a crumpled envelope beneath her chair. It wasn't just junk mail. No, it was an official-looking document. My hands trembled as I smoothed it out under the kitchen light. And there it was, my name, my son's name, and hers. The paper was a draft of something that would change everything I owned. My house, my savings, my life. She wasn't just after control. She was after everything. I stared at the paper, my stomach twisting, my breath shallow. My reflection in the kitchen window looked like a stranger, pale, shaking, eyes wide with fury. And in that moment I swore, if she wanted war, I would give her war. But what she didn't know was that I had a secret too. When you spend decades building a life, you forget how many little things you leave behind: receipts, letters, napkins with phone numbers, a box of old photographs shoved into the back of a closet. I used to think those things were junk. I was wrong. They are history, they are proof. After I found that draft, I stopped sleeping properly. I started rising before dawn, moving like a ghost around my own house, listening for the rhythm of their footsteps, rehearsing what I would say and what I would not say. I watched them more than I spoke. I watched her put on her lipstick, watched my son tie his tie without looking in the mirror, watched how he flinched when the subject of inheritance was mentioned, and then, almost by accident, I found it. It wasn't a grand discovery. It was in a small, battered shoebox beneath the bed where I kept things I thought I might someday need. I was looking for an old sewing kit when my fingers brushed the corner of an envelope, sealed with a smear of faded red lipstick. My name was written across it in a handwriting I recognized from years ago, my husband's hand, steady and slanted. I remember that handwriting the way you remember your mother's face. Inside the envelope were papers, bank statements, an old will, a list of accounts I hadn't looked at in years. Pages that proved the house was paid for long before my son was ever married. Receipts for renovations, letters about insurance, a legal note from a lawyer we had consulted when our savings were being moved after my husband's stroke. Names of trustees, small print about contingencies if something happened to both of us. There were also postcards from a woman my husband once trusted, and a photocopy of a signed agreement transferring a small but crucial power of attorney to me in case of incapacity. My breath stopped. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like hope. Not the silly, naive hope of the past, the kind that expects miracles, but a hard, practical hope. The kind that holds evidence and turns it into leverage. I sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread out, the morning sun cutting the room into warm squares. The house hummed with the distant sound of traffic, a kettle boiling somewhere down the street, life continuing like a stream around the source of my grief. I ran my thumb along the signatures as if I could feel my husband's presence there. I whispered his name, and the house answered with the creak of the floorboard where he used to sit. This was my ammunition. This was the secret weapon she never saw coming. She had been busy rewriting our future. She had not bothered to look at our past. She had assumed the house, the accounts, my son's loyalties, were hers to claim. She didn't realize that loyalty and legalities are different things. I began to plan, not in anger, though anger was a flame that fed the plan, but in cold calculation. I learned the names of the trustees. I called the bank under the guise of asking a general question and listened for the way the clerk said the account numbers, the way they pronounced the branch. I made notes, thin and neat, in a little notebook I kept by my bed. I paid attention to dates, to when documents had been signed, to when phone calls had been logged. At night, I folded the papers and slid them back into the shoebox. I would not act rashly. Rushing would give her exactly what she wanted, a scene, a fight to win sympathy. No, I would wait for the right moment. I would use her arrogance against her. She had taken the house because she thought she could manipulate a son. But she had never seen me as anyone who could fight. And yet, there was another part of me that trembled. A part that remembered my husband's laugh, the way he used to shove me gently out of the kitchen when I stayed up too late. He had left instructions written in the plainest language. He had said, "Protect what is ours." I had promised him I would. Plan formed piece by piece in my head, like a map drawn in the dark. I would call the lawyer. I would demand to see the full file. I would secure the account statements. I would expose the draft that tied my son's name to hers and show the trustees their intention had been manipulated. Public exposure is a different kind of blade, slow, surgical, and capable of cutting through the prettiest lies. But before I could do anything, before I could even breathe freely and begin to use what I had found, the house betrayed me again. That afternoon, the front door burst open. Her laughter trailed inside like smoke. My son was behind her, his face drained of color. He was holding something in his hand, a small, glossy envelope. He dropped it on the hallway table without a word. On the front was my name, inside a single sheet of paper, in bold letters a single sentence, "If you try to fight us, we will make sure you regret it." My hands went cold. The evidence sat on the table, the shoebox sealed in my room, and a new threat lay in black ink. It was not just legal maneuvering anymore. It was personal. The day I decided to act, the house felt colder than usual, like the air itself was watching. I dressed carefully, choosing my oldest black coat, the one my husband used to joke made me look dangerous in a respectable way. I wanted to look like someone the world would take seriously. I pinned a small braid of my husband's watch chain to the inside pocket of my coat and put the shoebox beneath my arm like a talisman. I invited them both to dinner. I told my son I needed to talk about something important. He came as if drawn by habit. She arrived late, makeup perfect, clutching a phone like a talisman. Their footsteps in the hallway sounded like someone else's life moving away from me. We sat down at the table. The house smelled of rosemary and lemon. I wanted nothing dramatic, just normalcy so the truth would cut in sharper. I poured the wine with hands that did not shake. My son asked the usual small questions. She smiled that smile that used to look kind. I kept my mouth closed until the right moment. The right moment, I had decided, would be when the witnesses were near. My neighbor who owed us a favor, the lawyer on the phone, the trustee who had once known my husband. I began slowly. "There are things people think are quiet," I said, "but quiet can be loud if you listen." They exchanged a look. She leaned forward, amusement on her face. "What are you talking about, Margaret?" she said, as if I were a child. I laid the phone she had left behind on the table and slid the printed messages across. I placed the draft on top of the legal papers from the shoebox. I let them read. I watched her face go red, then pale, then slick with a kind of thin, furious smile. My son's jaw tightened. He tried to speak, but I held up my hand. I showed the bank transfers, small ones at first, then bigger, ledgers that matched entries on the messages. I read aloud sentences she had written. "By next year, she'll be out completely." I told them about the draft that would have placed the house and accounts in her name. I played a recorded voice message I had managed to save from a call she thought was private. Her laughter, her plan. The room closed in. Her composure slipped. She began to cry loud, breathy sobs, the kind that ask for attention and forgiveness. My son stood, swearing, insisting there must be a mistake. I saw his face flicker between the woman he loved and the mother who had raised him. He looked like someone being pulled in two directions, and suddenly knowing both roads were on fire. Then I called the trustee. I had arranged for him to join us on speakerphone. I asked him to review the documents. He did. His tone changed from professional to still. He asked for originals, for signatures, for proof. I handed over the shoebox. I watched as he said, "We will look into this." His voice was flat, but his silence afterward was an answer. She looked at me and with a sharpness I had never seen, said, "You've been snooping. You stole my phone." Her voice was loud now. She accused me of hacking, of inventing evidence. My son, caught between love and law, swallowed and said, "Mom, if you did something illegal," his voice broke. I felt a cold wind go through me, the same wind that blew through the house on winter nights when my husband had been ill. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had already expected her to fight. The truth, I thought, would be enough. But she had a card I had not counted on. She pulled out a slim, glossy photograph and slapped it on the table. In that photograph was my handwriting, a framed, old document that looked like my husband's signature, except the signature had been traced, darker, steadier than any tremor his hand had ever made in his last years. The trustee looked up sharply. "My lawyer found this in a folder," she said. "It's proof she forged documents to make people believe she's right. If you study the ink, it's too new. If you look at the notary, it's stamped after my wedding. She's been cooking up a story to get sympathy." My heart lurched against my ribs, the table spun. I could see my husband's face in my mind, patient, honest, and I felt as if someone had taken a knife and carved into his memory. My son stared at the photograph, then at me. His eyes were full of confusion and fear. "How could you?" he whispered. I opened my mouth to answer, to tell him the man I loved had signed his name in this house a dozen times, to shout about receipts and bank statements and letters, but my voice failed me. The trustee's voice, when it came back on the line, was careful. "We will need to authenticate these," he said. "We must proceed legally." The room hummed with accusations and denials. Her sobs turned theatrical. My son's face closed like a book he no longer recognized. The neighbors shifted in their seats. The lawyer on speaker asked for calm. And then, through the thick air of betrayal and paper and old wounds, I heard the faintest click, the sound of my phone receiving a new message. I glanced down. The screen lit up with a name I had not expected to see. The message glowed in my palm like a curse. "We have something on you too." For a moment, I thought my heart would give out. My hands shook so badly the glass on the table rattled when I set the phone down. She noticed, of course she noticed, and the corner of her mouth curved into a secret little smile. That night, I couldn't eat. The food sat on the table, untouched, while I sat in the dark kitchen listening to the hum of the refrigerator. My son had gone upstairs without a word. She followed later, her heels clicking against the wood, the sound of a conqueror climbing a throne that was not hers. I waited until the house was silent. Then I opened the shoebox again. I laid out the papers, one by one, like a priest preparing a ritual. My husband's will, the receipts, the account statements, the trust agreement, my secret weapon was still there, untouched by their lies. But now I understood. This wouldn't end in silence. She wanted a war of whispers. I would give her a war of fire. The next week, I invited the family over again. Not just my son and her, but everyone, cousins, aunts, old friends of my husband, people who knew the house, who had walked these walls long before she ever poisoned them. I cooked like a woman possessed, chicken with rosemary, potatoes baked until their skins cracked, bread rising in the oven, the way it used to when my son was small. When they arrived, the dining room glowed with candles, shadows stretched across the walls like witnesses. I greeted them with a steady smile, though my heart pounded beneath my dress. She walked in last, her perfume heavy, her voice dripping with confidence. She thought she had already won. We ate in silence at first, then I stood. My voice didn't tremble. I laid the papers on the table, but this time I didn't speak to her. I spoke to everyone else. I told them about the messages, the draft of the will she had hidden, the manipulation, the plan to erase me. I spoke of the night I found the phone, the humiliation at dinner, the way my son had been turned against me. I spoke of loyalty, of betrayal, of the difference between love and control. Every word fell heavy in the room. She tried to interrupt, but I silenced her with a single glance. For once, she realized she wasn't the center of the story. Then I revealed my husband's envelope. I read his words aloud, his instructions, his trust in me to protect what was ours. I showed the signatures, the accounts, the receipts. I held them up in the candlelight so every eye in that room could see the ink, the paper, the truth. The room shifted, people murmured, my son's face went pale. He looked at me, truly looked for the first time in months. His eyes filled with something, shame, regret, maybe both and her. She laughed, a high, broken sound. You think this will save you, she sneered. We still have proof. We can destroy you. I leaned forward, my voice low and cold. Then do it, but remember, when you destroy me, you destroy him too. And this house, this family, will see who you really are. For a moment her mask cracked. Just a flicker, but it was enough. Dinner ended in silence. She left in a storm of perfume and slammed doors. My son lingered, his hand brushing mine as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Later that night, when the house was empty again, I sat in the dark dining room, the candle wax hardened on the tablecloth, the papers stacked neatly by my side. I thought about revenge, what it really meant. It wasn't fire or shouting or blood. It was truth, cold, undeniable truth, the kind that rots lies from the inside out. And now she knew I had it. I closed my eyes, my hand resting on the shoebox. My husband's voice echoed in my memory, protect what is ours. I had, and I would, because the war wasn't over. The feast was only the beginning. I sat alone after they left. The candles had melted into rivers of wax across the cloth, their flames long gone, their smoke still hanging in the air like ghosts. My hands trembled, not from fear anymore, but from release. For months, maybe years, I had been drowning in silence, and tonight, I had finally spoken. But victory never feels the way you expect. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't glorious. It was heavy, like carrying the weight of every word, every secret, every betrayal that had poisoned this house. I thought of my son, his pale face when he heard the truth, the shame in his eyes, the way his hand brushed mine before he left. For a moment, I saw my little boy again, the child who used to run through this house, who used to call for me when he had bad dreams. And I wondered if he will ever forgive me or himself. As for her, she will return. I know she will. Her kind never retreat quietly. She will sharpen her words, gather her lies, and strike again. But now she knows I am not the weak woman she thought I was. I carry his voice, his words, his trust inside me, and that makes me stronger than she will ever be. Revenge isn't fire, it isn't blood. It is silence after the storm, when the truth has been spoken and cannot be taken back. That is what I gave her tonight. That is what will haunt her every time she looks in the mirror. I closed the shoebox gently, as if tucking my husband's spirit back to rest. Then I blew out the last candle. Darkness filled the room, but inside me, something was still burning, something that no one can ever extinguish. This is my story, my confession, my revenge.